limited capacity up until now. He's going to be full-fledged CFO that an organization like needs. So we're going to expand his role and his compensation, obviously, with that. We're not doing anything tonight. I don't want to rush. We'll send all the information to the commissioner and hopefully make a decision at the next meeting. There is a process we want to make sure, because Wayne has been a CFO for the borough, whether under the pension rule, can he serve in the same capacity as a contractor services or on the payroll? So we have asked the state to give us the guidance on that. And once that is finalized, then we'll make an appointment for him either way, either contracted service, and that's going to be the resolution required by the commissioner to adopt. So it will be at the next meeting. Obviously, it will be retroactive to March 1st. Other than that, for now, I think you'll see some changes made. We're establishing a financial system in the borough now that will be tracking full accounting of all the SERA funds, and then you'll be getting a reports. Besides that, tonight on the agenda, we have approval of 2023 budget. While I've been appointed as of March 1st, for the last month and a half, I've been working to recognize the issues and start, implementing changes. One of the things I learned that we never adopted 2023 budget. I believe that wasn't introduced, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was introduced last summer, but it never took its next step of adoption. And so I worked with state to get them to approve. You introduce in January. Tonight, we hope you adopt the budget. Our auditor is here just in case anybody has questions. For all intents and purposes, the year is completed. I don't believe there is any issues with the financial position, right? So state has already approved the budget. We had to take certain steps and giving them a resolution of delayed introductions. Along with that, Wayne and I and auditor will be working on 2024 budget, which is also should have been adopted by now. Generally, under the agency that operates in different accounting practice, you're supposed to have a budget adopted before the start of the year. But that's why you had a approved temporary budget so that we can legally operate and spend money. So that was done, and I want to thank Commissioner for doing that. Probably in March or April, we'll bring forward resolutions, and then going forward, we'll make sure that we are done in time before the close of 24. We'll have a 25 budget in place. I also want to thank Commissioner for appointing Rena Salmon, our planner. Chairman will introduce her. I worked with her extensively over the last 4 years. As you know, I've been a business administrator, chief financial officer, director of finance for Old Bridge Township. I serve in chief financial officer as well as the director of finance. And I was on the treasurer for the Old Bridge Redevelopment Agency for almost 30 years. I was business administrator, and I played extensive role in redevelopment process that is currently in place and ongoing in Old Bridge. So I'm very much familiar with the redevelopment process as being part of the Old Bridge Redevelopment Agency. And I'm going to try to bring all my knowledge, understanding here now. And Mayor has directed the goal going forward and not looking back. We want to go forward. We want to look forward. We want to bring a lot of good stuff. And I think we have seems to be a great group of commissioners as part, leading this process. And we'll bring forward SERA and SERA projects into the 21st, 22nd century and a lot of good things that we're looking forward to.
Thank you, Matthew. And as you already mentioned, we are welcoming today Vina Swan as our SERA planner. I'll allow Vina to to talk about her experiences, but it is extensive when it comes to redevelopment. And we're very happy to have her on board.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, commissioners. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to work. I have almost 20 years of experience in the field of planning. I have been working specifically in redevelopment planning for almost 10 years now. I was responsible for most of the transit village development that occurred in Plainfield. I authored the redevelopment studies and the redevelopment plans in Plainfield and City of Orange. I lead the planning efforts or redevelopment planning efforts in Old Bridge. So most of the redevelopment plan projects that are coming to fruition now in Old Bridge were authored by me, this area investigation studies as well as plans. And even after the plans have been approved, I've been working and managing the projects while they are in construction phase. So I have extensive experience in the field, and I'm truly excited to be serving you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Now entertain a motion, or at least to introduce a resolution or bylaw amendment.
Yes, I make a motion that we amend our bylaws to adopt the Robert's Rules of Order as our meeting standard.
Any comments?
Will amending the Robert's rules change any of the other sections of the bylaw?
Yeah, you apply Robert's rules when your bylaws don't otherwise cover it.
Second? No.
No, I didn't know if you
Oh, no, I just said second.
take a roll call.
A second.
Councilman Zabrowski.
Yes.
Mr. Grillo.
Yes.
Mr. Scott.
Yes.
Mr. Davis.
Yes.
Mrs. Duffy.
Yes.
Mr. Delina.
Yes.
Ms. Fisher.
Yes.
Councilwoman Roberts.
Yes.
Thank you, Jim. We have two pending matters, waterfront development and several landfill three redevelopment. I know we have folks from several landfill three. I don't know if you want to do another presentation of any sort, or the comments to be made.
We're not planning to make a presentation this evening. We had worked with your planner over the course of the last, and for the record, I'm Jennifer Smith with Gibbons. We had responded to some comments from your planner over the course of the last few weeks since our last meeting, which resulted in some small changes to the redevelopment plan for the better. And those are before you this evening for action, following up on the presentation that we made last time.
Our professionals, any comments? Updates?
With regard to the redevelopment plan, no, we had issued everybody a copy of our report recommending the changes to the waterfront redevelopment plan, and we would urge you to go through and adopt it.
Thank you. Anything on the waterfront development?
Yes, with regard to waterfront development, we had some great news during the past 3 months, and that is that the toughest spot of the cleanup on the whole site was known to us as TiO2, which was the ore storage area where they stored all of the ilmenite ore that was causing the radioactive problem. That has been removed, okay? The site is coming up to grade. It is a tremendous success because of the fact that it was so difficult to do because of the poor soils conditions. And it was a very expensive item, and we have to compliment Riverton for being able to finally get to it, because all of these years they could not find a way that would be acceptable to the DEP to achieve this. With regard to the other stuff on waterfront development, Justin, why don't you give them an update?
Sure. What everyone's interested in, the Bass Pro Shop, they have issued plans to the redeveloper for construction of the core and shell of the building. That is currently up to bid. So they expect that to go through and hopefully starting construction end of March, April. They have completed an electrical duct bank that will be along Chevalier Avenue that will serve the Bass Pro Shop. Progress towards the Bass Pro building. On site, they completed 1,800 feet of force main. They just have 150 left, and that'll be on the NCUA property. Make great progress there. They have awarded a contract for the deep gravity sanitary sewer in the Riverton Village portion. And they've also awarded a contract for the sanitary storm and water for the Gateway Service District. They're making great progress in all areas.
And as I said before in earlier meetings, not all of you were here, but as the weather warms up and the ground gets more stabilized, because with all the rain during a rainy season, it's pretty muddy out there. But as things dry up, anybody that wants to take a tour, we're happy to go through and set it up so that we can get you out there, show you what it's all about, and that you get to see it firsthand.
Mayor and I did a tour, we were there for last year, and that's one of the plans that we want all the commissioners to take a trip down there. Justin, what about the restaurant pads that they were supposed to start construction in school?
That was the Gateway District. That's where they're going to be doing the storm sewer, the sanitary sewer. They
Okay,
have two
Putting in
tenants.
the infrastructure, yeah.
Yes.
that's, they were telling us that they'll be ready, shoveling ground in by spring.
They just received resolution compliance from the planning board. They have planners approval. So they're making progress. And I believe construction probably will start this year
Like
on the buildings.
from the vertical.
Yes.
Wow.
One other thing, Chairman, and we discussed it probably a year ago. We have a billboard on the site that we leased to the redeveloper. I've mentioned to everyone, don't be surprised that the billboard is going to come down, because in order to build Bass Pro, we need to take the billboard down, but don't worry that our arrangement with the redevelopers, they have to continue to pay us rent on the billboard. I think it's for another 5 years. So the billboard's not coming down tomorrow, but it'll probably down by April, May. So if somebody says to you, oh my God, the billboard's coming down, say, that's good. It means Bass Pro is going up.
I'd like to move on to resolutions, and the first resolution is in reference to landfill freight and the Melrose redevelopment plan. Before I ask for motion, are there any additional questions that any of the commissioners may have either for the applicant or for our professionals on this?
I do. One question in general. This particular property was previously going to a power plant, so there were variances applied for that project to move forward.
Not variances, okay? They're modifications. You have to understand that the redevelopment plan was prepared for the power plant. So from the standpoint, that ordinance was set up for having a power plant there.
So that particular ordinance was set up for them. Now we're putting these modifications in for the new project.
That's correct.
Do the previous modifications carry over, or are they completely dissolved?
What happens is that the ordinance is amended. The specific sections that are pertaining to the power plant are being deleted, and the new sections pertaining to the cold storage warehouse are being added. And some parameters are changing in order to make that happen.
So I could see that some of the changes were made because it was removing for the power plant, but did we remove everything for the power plant? Or just what applied to the changes, the modifications for this project?
Justin?
There's only minor wording specifically about the power plant, and that was removed. But overall, it's a redevelopment plan that could have applied to multiple uses. It was tailored towards a power plant, but it could have been a lot of things.
That's right.
Okay, because this is a specific example. I was just wondering if typically anything that was modified for a project that didn't come through is eliminated and we start from scratch with the new project.
I think the answer is really, the ordinance is what you want the ordinance to be, okay? And in the previous case, the ordinance was desired for the power plant.
Right.
So the plan now is to go through and have cold storage warehouses, and so that's the focus. But if something comes in on the second piece that complies with the uses in that plan, remember, there's two pieces of property on the landfill, one in the front off the landfill and then one on the landfill. The only reason why the one on the landfill isn't proceeding now is the DEP is giving the developer some trouble about building structures on there because they're concerned because it was a Superfund site, even though technically it should not have been. And it was put in as a Superfund site only because there were people that testified that they dumped 13,000 drums there. And when the study was done by the PRPs and the DEP to determine how many drums that were there, turned out that was like less than 20. So it probably should have never been, but since it was, everybody at the DEP's antenna is up so that they don't want to take any chances, and they're being very cautious of what goes on the second piece.
I do have a couple of other questions about parking. I didn't understand quite the difference between parking. First floor space will be if there are offices, otherwise it's going to be based on employees. What's the reasoning for that?
Well, offices is easily defined, okay? You do that per square footage, but a cold storage warehouse building that's automated, okay, doesn't fit under any of the categories for number of parking spaces per square foot. You really have to model it after the specific use. We wound up going through and were provided a number of uses that were examples from the developer that had different ratios based upon the number of employees that were working there. And this ordinance, as we have it written now, and the number of parking spaces that's proposed for the site is more conservative than the other locations where cold storage warehouses have been built near here.
So we're more likely going with the employees versus the square footage.
That is our recommendation, because otherwise you'll have a huge parking lot and nobody in it.
To clarify, it'll be both. It'll be the employees, and if there's an
Yeah.
office, it'll also take that into account. So it'll be a
So
combination.
a blend of
The
that.
office portion is definable, so we can do that by ratio.
Okay. The other thing about the recommendation was the South Amboy redevelopment plan. Since I haven't ever seen the South Amboy redevelopment plan, I didn't know what that was going to be telling me. So if you could attach that, that would be helpful.
Sure, that was just an example that they used for the parking that was approved by, so it's just showing that this type of model has been approved in the past recently by the same developer.
And still on parking, bank of 30%. What does that mean?
The applicant requested that they could not install the 30% of parking. However, we made it that the borough gets final say in that. So if there's a certain amount they need, they requested they could bank 30% of that.
So they're going to withhold 30% of the parking until such a time that they may need it to come before us to get that.
Right, they have the option to.
Okay.
They're not gonna park on the street or anywhere, that's the key. We
They
don't want
can,
them to-
absolutely. Right. There's no way, they can't park on.
Exactly.
No, I just
Adjournable
didn't- I
road,
just didn't understand there were so many different moving parts in parking.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to clarify that.
Well, you don't have too many cold storage warehouses in the Middlesex County area, okay? That's the issue.
Sorry, I'm taking up so much time.
You have a lot of regular
Oh,
warehouses,
boy.
but if we ever use the ratio of warehousing, there would be a field of parking that nobody would be in.
You don't want that.
We don't want that.
Okay, so that's a good thing. And that is also prohibited parking within the front yard setback is actual parking spaces, not the entire parking lot. I didn't,
Right, so, if you
Okay.
there's not, parking isn't allowed within the front yard setback 50 feet. They don't have any actual parking where the cars will be. However, the driveway is allowed to fall within the 50-yard setback. So that was just clarifying that that's okay, the driveway, but no actual parked cars can be within the front yard setback.
And you have to look at this in context of the site. Recognize something. They are trying to go through and put this warehouse, cold storage warehouse, on the front of the site, in front of the landfill, because they can get an approval of that easy. That's the same thing that the power plant was going to go through and do. So from the standpoint, the actual distance from the front of the building to the road is not 150 feet or 200 feet. It's because it can't be set back unless you don't want this use. So in order to get this use, you have to go through And you have to lay it out so, one, we don't want to have parking in the front yard setback, okay? But some part of the drive that you have to get to the spaces is in the front yard setback. And the other thing that you should realize is that because of the configuration of the site, if you look in the back of the site is much higher than the front of the site. So there will actually be a big fill in the front of this, and the parking lot is going to go through and be elevated by about 6 to 8 feet above, up to 10 feet,
Sloping upwards.
sloping upwards. Yes.
And retaining walls for loading docks do not fall under the landscaping requirement.
The redevelopment plan, it states you need a certain type of landscaping on all retaining walls. They were saying that you need retaining walls for the loading dock. You can't put landscaping there. That's just clearing the language for whoever reviews the planning board.
And
The loading dock to be in the back,
Yes,
Yes.
not in the front,
that's correct.
right?
The only thing that you'll have in the front is a parking lot, okay, with the cars facing the building, okay? And a detention basin on the other half of the front. And then on the side, there would be another detention basin and some parking behind that.
so retention. And I think I saw somewhere about the landscaping, instead of building up the landscaping, we're going to use the existing tree line.
Well, if this were a situation where the building was at grade, okay, wasn't being elevated, we might go through and require a berm, okay? In this particular case, since you're already filling 10 feet in the front, we're giving them the option to save the trees in front of that fill area and supplement it with some other evergreens and things like that to provide some buffering. The only thing that we're really worried about is, even though the cars aren't going to be aiming towards the road with their headlights, you're going to be aiming towards, when the cars are pulling in, we want to go through and soften that.
I kind of like the idea that we're keeping the existing trees rather than
Right.
cutting them down, building a berm and putting bushes there. So I was a little surprised that that was an adjustment rather than what we normally do. And I think the final question is a general question, not specifically of this, about the affordable housing section. What do they have to provide for affordable housing?
They have to pay through the formula. The town has an ordinance that requires them to pay so much per square foot.
And it's
Towards
a non-residential development fee, they call it. It's a requirement of all the affordable housing settlements.
Is that just Sayreville or is that everybody?
Everybody.
And where does that fund go to?
Entire state, that every town has this.
The town has an affordable housing trust fund.
So it goes to several, it doesn't go to the state.
That's right.
No, the state is with the
The state requires everybody to do it.
And the intent is that's going to be there for the next round of affordable housing that we may be ordered to build.
And that was a lot of general questions. I'm sorry but that was a good example for me. So I can understand a little bit more about how this project is moving and what's standard for other projects. I appreciate all the answers.
Good questions. Good questions.
But really, I suppose this is for Dave. In the draft landfill Melrose redevelopment plan that was included, section 5.1 discusses the eco-industrial redevelopment area, and there's a further discussion in section 11.4. My assumption from reading this is that there is only one of those eco-industrial redevelopment areas in the town, and it's only this site. Is that correct?
When the ordinance were first drafted,
Yeah.
okay, it was a piece of property in Melrose next to AB Corps was included in the redevelopment plan along with this particular site. But the site in Melrose is mostly wetlands, okay? So it really only applied to this. When the ordinance was drafted, it was drafted to put a power plant on this site.
So there's only one site in the entire town zoned this way.
Yes.
It was originally zoned primarily for power plant, but there are 18 permissible uses. Okay, I'm just curious because it seems like it could be a fairly useful zoning.
I don't disagree with you.
allocate
it
to other
was,
sites.
good point. We wound up going through and recommended that you implement it for this site because it came from the redevelopment agency to the town, and we only were dealing with that site. But it could wind up being a good suggestion to the planning board to consider when they update the master plan.
Well, again, the discussion later on about battery storage, and it seems like if there were a 19th use listed, battery storage would make sense. And so it's just an interesting, unique, literally, it's the only one, zoning.
Yep.
But, you know, perhaps, Chairman, that's something that we could consider when we think about how we address manufacturing district zoning. Thank you.
Any other questions related to this? If not, can I entertain a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
John, roll call.
I second.
Councilman Zabrowski,
Yes.
Mr. Grillo,
Yes.
Mr. Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Mrs. Duffy,
Yes.
Mr. Delina,
Yes.
Ms. Fisher,
Yes.
Councilwoman Robin.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, I think we have to go through and make sure that not only is it passed, but we have to get it to the planning board and or the mayor and council, right?
Correct. So what happens is that a copy of the resolution, once it's signed and sealed and finalized, it's sent over to the borough clerk.
Any other issues related to that resolution? Moving on, resolution, number B, resolution to adopt our fiscal budget for 2023. We have our auditor here as well as Wayne. Are there any questions related to the budget for 2023 and its adoption?
Yes. Before we adopt, we have to have a public hearing on that.
We have to open it to the public.
Okay.
This particular resolution.
So, I get a motion to open the public.
I make a motion to open to the public.
Second. All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
We're open to our public. Any questions, comments on the 2023 budget? Seeing none, can I have a motion to close public?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Now, may I have a resolution?
I'll make a
Or a
resolution.
motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Again, just to be clear, this is 2023 budget, not 2024. We'll be presenting 2024 budget in the near future. And basically the year is closed, it's been already spent, or they are spent within what the budget was approved. Right? And
Lisa. I have a question. I wasn't here, right? So I don't know what happened, but I heard earlier it was introduced. It just never was voted on and approved.
They were approved. There are changes there are combination of things must have happened. I mean, I can't speak about everything. But a little bit I learned that, state has gone from a manual budget process. You send a form, mail to them and everything to a completely electronic process. That process requires certain people to get approved. And I've seen many times gets delayed. And that's something, one of the reason my understanding that it was somewhat delayed. And then internally here, it never came back, never got approved. And I know some of you were not here, including me, but that's why, but even then though, because you're approving now, you are, as a commissioner, approving retroactive.
And that's why it was reintroduced.
You have to reintroduce that.
At the last meeting.
Some roll call.
Councilman Zabrowski.
Yes.
Mr. Grillo,
Yes.
Mr. Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Davis.
Yes.
Mrs. Duffy,
Abstain.
Mr. Delina,
Yes.
Ms. Fisher,
Yes.
Councilwoman Robin.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
On to commissioners' comments, and I just want to make one comment. There. One of the things I'd like to see moving forward, and I'm sure that the economic, SERA's had these in the past, but I'd like to reinstitute the workshop session periodically. I'm not looking to do it each month, but maybe quarterly or with some value. Part of what economic redevelopment is really to take really a more holistic approach to and to provide options for council and community to move forward in certain respects. So I think it's incumbent upon SERA to look at certain factors in certain areas to come up with those options, right? So that we can reinvest, so that we can provide those attract options and opportunities as well. So one of the things I'd like to do is look at the meeting perhaps in April and meet half hour early for workshop with the discussion of really, and I'd ask Steve to lead that discussion on our Main Street downtown area. As you may know, based on a conversation and discussion that came up at the council meeting Monday night, there's a question of what to do with the old Borough Hall. Well, the Borough Hall shouldn't be something that's discussed by itself, but really more of a plan, because there's more to be done in the downtown area. And again,
All right, yes. I'm saying that because I agree with you.
for discussion and for options, for a vision to see where we may be able to go. So if in fact, if everyone is amenable to moving forward with those workshops, I'd like to be able to place that on the calendar and have that as the subject of discussion for that workshop.
Mr. Chairman, if you have those in the future, okay, just make sure you tell us, a month or so in advance so that we can have maps prepared for you for the workshop. So
Does this work with your calendar?
yeah, absolutely.
That is, if I can just comment, that is an excellent idea. If there's anything that I think we need, and I've heard from other people, is more of a vibrant downtown. I was visiting my son-in-law's town down in South Jersey, and same type of, it was a community of the same demographics, and their downtown was so much more bustling with the different restaurants and things like that, bars and stuff. And this was really good. It was just a nice experience. I always wished I could figure out a way to do that.
Chairman, I think it's an excellent idea, just like everybody's saying. And one of the things I'd like to bring forward now through the workshop process, one of the idea is that we start looking at the town and come up with the ideas of where we can do redevelopment process. We come up with the redevelopment ideas instead of we get the builder or developers coming in and saying, okay, I want to do redevelopment here. I think we need to start focus, and that's one of the discussion I had with Rena is that let's start looking at the town. We did the same thing in Old Bridge, and start looking at town and come up with the ideas where we can do some redevelopment and improve. Downtown is an excellent idea, Main Street. But we have a number of sections in town. We may be able to develop same thing in other sections. So, I think and it should be through the workshop. Because this part is to get the business done, and then workshop is where we start exploring the ideas.
If I could just answer, you may know the group, but there's a group called Urban Land Institute. You know this? I just wonder if we could get somebody from there in who may be able to give us some advice. And what do you think of that? Because you've dealt with that more than me.
Yeah, so just for background, I own an economic development consulting firm. We specialize in downtown redevelopment. I'm also the executive director of the improvement district in Millburn Short Hills. And we represent 500 businesses in that district. And part of what we do every day is placemaking, streetscaping, and general economic principles, right? And so there's a lot of free resources available at the state level through the DCA. But it requires a little bit of, just basic assessment, right? I think if we ask today, how many properties are in the downtown? I bet nobody knows the answer. How are they zoned? How many are vacant? How many, there's basic assessments that we need to do in order even just to get us to the point of having an intelligent discussion about what are those amenities that you're talking about.
Yeah.
No one's done it for probably 30+ years.
Talk about it.
We talked about it. So, gathering that data and knowing who the owners are, knowing what the tenant mix is, right? Those are all fairly basic steps in assessing a downtown community. And then you start getting into the more complex economic development strategies, but also, the placemaking and streetscaping opportunities. And it doesn't take a lot of effort or even money to put out planters and fix broken sidewalks and things like that. And so I think we can do a lot. It's just a matter of starting at the very granular level and just understanding what we're even dealing with in this downtown.
And I think that the agency has to set priorities. Which areas are their priorities? And then you could focus your attention. Fortunately, we've been able to go through and through the years, go through and develop financial resources so that we have a decent balance in your account so that you can pay for some of these things.
Sure. Yeah, and I think that's a great point that Dave makes. I think there's some very basic things that we can do at a fairly inexpensive level of bringing on professionals who understand downtown redevelopment. Once you get that baseline, then you start thinking bigger. You start applying for the state grants that are available to every community, but you can't tell the story, you can't secure the funds. And so we need to make sure that we're getting that basic data. But I think the conversation does begin with what are the deficiencies that have existed? Everybody here has been here for a long time, and I'm sure that these stores come and go and properties go vacant. And I think we can learn a lot from the history that everyone shares here.
So that everybody knows, the biggest problem with our downtown is all the stores that we used to have there are now apartments. Okay, so it's not really that we have a vacancy problem. We have a problem that the uses that were commercial uses before are no longer commercial uses.
Building typology is critical. You gotta understand what percentage you have of strict commercial versus mixed use versus residential versus, I'm sure there is a hodgepodge of even industrial spaces down here. And so, we need to understand what each property actually looks like.
Some of them are maybe deep inside residential, yet some of our restaurants are. I remember going to Cecilia Street, all the way in the back. And we had to see how we can bring it, in a
I worked
forefront.
there for 10 years.
Yeah,
I had a friend of mine that said, this is where you go if you're.
there's a nice restaurant, great food.
Yeah.
We all love it.
And just keep in mind, we're starting at 6 rather than 6:30. So this will start as a very basic conversation. And I don't think, obviously, we would know where to be settling anything at this point, but it's the beginning of conversation. And David, you're right, we have thick areas. I just think that we can concentrate in one and then we can move forward to others. Any comments?
No, I'm actually trying to absorb in as much as I can. So, but I think I agree. I don't see anybody's names, so I'm so sorry. Steve.
Or Dave.
He goes by David, Steve.
So I agree with Steve. I think a basic analysis of the study area is more critical because you can start with very basic things. Like one thing I've noticed whenever I've traversed through this corridor is even the lighting is poor, right? So you don't find it attractive, or most of the stores are closed when it gets dark. So you don't really see what is inside. So there are very basic things that you can start with and then start flushing it through. But I think having that initial study and creating an inventory, looking at the ordinances too, because what I've noticed in my experiences, like with Old Bridge, the ordinance was so outdated, like nobody had really looked through it. So we started fixing ordinance so that it's more business friendly and it's easier on the businesses so that you can attract them, like relaxing parking, making sure there is adequate parking, but at the same time, making sure that the area is not overparked. And then attracting businesses, getting different combinations. But I think we have to start somewhere. And this is something that has bothered because although I never worked for Sayreville, I have been very familiar with Sayreville. I have a lot of friends who live here. So for almost last 15 years, I have been coming to Sayreville and it always bothers me. Same thing with Old Bridge. How come these towns don't have a true downtown? Like why is it when we look at what's Metuchen? 20 years ago, Metuchen was dead. Nobody used to go there. today is like hustling and bustling. Every restaurant is full and it's shaping up so well. So, somewhere we have to make a start. And I always believe that there is always a solution. You just have to start digging in deeper.
This procedural,
Process wise, if everyone would like to start the April meeting at 6, we just need a motion and then Joan will have to do a new notice for the.
Chairman, with that also, I think one of the subject is that we only did the meeting date to April because of some of the conflict. For example, Mia has a conflict, I have some conflict, others. Steve, I know, has a conflict because of his work. He couldn't make January 18th meeting. So we switched back. We went to January 18th, then we switched back. So what I like to do now is I'm gonna poll everybody to see what date we can change the meeting to. Either we change third Thursday, if it's not possible, or second Thursday, or we change a day. Instead of Thursday, we change to Wednesday, which is convenient to everybody. For example, we can't do Monday because we have a council meeting. So Monday is out. So I'm gonna poll and figure out, and then we'll adapt the rest of the year schedule.
Okay.
With that.
A motion, or we can wait if you want to do it all together when we're doing all the meetings
Yeah,
next.
I think it would be good that we
We can do everything, then you can do the quarterly ones at the same time.
it kind of took up a lot of time for commissioners' comments. Are there any other comments from commissioners?
I just had one, basic administrative. I don't know if this was a test of receiving our packets this month, but for one, I like to have a hard copy in front of me. It could come through the mail or it can be delivered, but I like to be able to review the packet that Monday or even the Friday before the meeting, not have to call the secretary to see if the meeting is still on because I don't have any information before me. So I don't, like I said, I don't know if this was like a test, a test case or what the deal is, because even though I'm a retiree, my schedule is tight and everything goes on that schedule. And if I have a meeting on Thursday, I don't plan anything else so that I can make sure the review is done. Other than that.
Give us some time. We're reorganizing changes. And so it will be, eventually we'll get a process established. I know you sent an email and I immediately followed up to see if we can. Delivery, I don't know if that's, because if you do mail, it's almost a week now. So mail is not gonna be the answer. A town doesn't do the delivery anymore. Am I right, Glenn? There's no package delivery.
Yeah, we do no longer have a
So
courier.
what we'll do is for now, we'll arrange for a schedule, have Joan prepare the minute, and as soon as it's ready, we'll prepare them and we'll advise the commissioner to
We
pick it up.
always, there was a service, I don't know, Joe, what service did you use that we pay every month for delivery service? And the packets were delivered to our home. That's all part of that.
Well, what happened was there was some discussion about whether there's going to be any modifications in delivery. We missed the Friday time, so I took it upon myself just to send an email copy out to everyone with a note that if you wanted a hard copy, which I anticipated probably would happen. And we heard from you first, and then when I got your email, I responded, next day I got the email. I just personally delivered it myself.
Yeah.
We didn't use it technically as service. I just made arrangements to have somebody to do it, or I would do it myself. But that's not, we're trying to figure that out. But I know that you folks want the hard copies, and that's understandable. This week was an aberration. It's not sent as a test. It was just, since it was a little bit late in the first place on Monday, I figured, let me email it out so you have something to look at, and then we went. But as our director indicated, I'm going to be working on that. And but I think everybody is of the same view that you'd like a hard copy. So if that's the case, and we'll figure out how best to achieve that.
So we'll get it done.
Otherwise, I'm happy.
Any other comments?
I did bring the zoning map because I did want to try to keep track of a visual of where all our projects are, because sometimes we have major discussions about, is it above this place, or is it by Dirty Mill Road, or is it by the Washington? So I brought it, and Dave, I think you probably have better maps that are zoning that could illustrate some of the projects that we've got going on and can identify. I remember you had a smaller one for us for the SERA properties,
That's right.
but I think if we can get a larger size with the ability to do that.
Not a problem. Be happy to do it. In fact, Justin is working on a revised pamphlet that shows all of the redevelopment projects. If you remember, about 2 years ago, I think we circulated one. But with the new members, we're going to prepare one so that everybody goes through and gets an updated copy of that report that talks about each one of the redevelopment projects, even if some of them are almost done, just so that you have it in one place.
Okay, and I just wanted to comment, Steve, I did look at the zoning map that we have currently, that is the current map, and it doesn't have the RAEI zone on it yet that I can find. So I think that's something we have to send back to zoning to be able to get that, or Dave, is that
Well, that
something?
document is 10 years old that I read today, so
And yeah, that's-
it might be time.
It might be time,
Might be time.
so.
Might be time to update the map.
So how do we go about doing that? Is that a zoning board?
That's usually coordinated through the planning board. The planning board would go through and either direct their planner to go through and update the map, or if there's really not significant changes, direct us to prepare it. So
Would this happen naturally through the master plan update with the planning board?
it's usually done at that point in time.
Okay, because they're in the middle of doing that right now. Okay. And it's 10-year cycle, so it's about
We
right.
have a GIS mapping.
We do not have complete GIS mapping. We are slowly building a GIS for the town, starting with water and sewer, paying it in that way. And I think this year, Glenn got us authorization to go into the next phase, but up until now, we really did not.
Just a few meetings ago, when we first got involved with cold storage, I'm not sure if you, Dave, or somebody said that it was really advantageous because they paid so much more taxes than a regular warehouse. Could you tell us what that was and why that is?
Well, take a look at the deal, okay? The deal for the project is that they're going to go through and provide, I guess, $10 million, right
Yeah,
now?
right, yeah.
Okay, for the first half. And
But more than that.
Us?
Yeah.
At 17, let us know, guys, we'd be thrilled.
Yeah. Okay.
But it was at a minimum of that, plus there's an additional amount.
I think it's 15.
A total of 17 and then.
Yeah, I think it's 15 plus 2, so 17, but
Everything to do with the use, though? Does the,
The
It was
rental.
because of the process we went through. When the power plant, and recognize, the power plant was triggered because the redevelopment agency was hearing from the mayor and council that they got the landfill, we need to do something with it. Mayor and council asked the redevelopment agency to issue an RFP to find out what the best use is for the town from the standpoint of a rate of. We put out the RFP. We wound up going through and got a proposal for the power plant that was going to go through and give the borough a lot of money, plus pay a pilot of about $1 million a year. And as a result of that, that was determined to be the highest and best use that we could get at that particular point in time. When that had lingered on, okay, and it eventually died because of basically the administration's position that they really don't want fossil fuel plants. So they couldn't market the power was the problem. And as a result of that, they had to pull the plug. They invested a huge amount of money. And then we went back to the mayor and council and said, do you want SERA to go through and put out another RFP? We put out another RFP that was open. It was really a statement of interest to find out who would be interested and what the deal would be that they would propose. we were fortunate enough to get the proposal for the cold storage warehouse units. And that is where we're at today, okay? It was a nice deal for the purchase of the property, assumption of liabilities because it is a landfill. Even though borough still has some liabilities, the developer's picking up some of the other liabilities. But the ability to go through, or the liability to go through and continue to monitor the monitoring wells, to maintain the surface of the landfill, the developer's taking on all that responsibility. So it's been a win-win proposal thus far.
Right.
When it comes to the pilot, things like that, those are things that have to be decided yet.
Yeah, sure.
But those types of uses are very good uses.
Yeah,
And Ken, the building itself is more expensive to build than the rents it generates are more
Yeah,
expensive.
okay,
So those two things generate
Yeah.
more taxes.
And there's very little traffic as compared to other warehouses.
I think Dave, this time, I think that one of the things I learned that there's like pilot, it's like a stigma here. A pilot is one of the best tools that municipality has under the state laws. And so we need to be cognizant about supporting, because otherwise you're not going to attract this type of businesses coming in town because they need clear understanding of what their tax exposures are over the next 10, 15, 20 years in order to get the necessary financing. So I hope that SERA, and I'm going to be pleading to the council at some point, SERA, to make sure that the town, when we recommend, pretty much all our project will have a pilot attached to that because of the nature of the business. Its redevelopment is not that straightforward, saying I'm just going to pay whatever the tax rate is. They need very specific knowledge about their exposure in order to get the sufficient financing. And so I hope talking to you, all of you, the two council member here, hoping to, convey the message to the mayor and council, because it isn't something that SERA will approve. We can't approve that. It has to be approved by the council. And that businesses that rely on, they come in, they start building, and suddenly we change our mind saying we're not going to get pilot. That's tough on those businesses. And we will get a reputation that we will not be attracting other businesses. So I'm just pleading here, and I know it's not our role to approve it, but we all should have an influence in positively talking about it. It's a very few tools in the toolbox that state gives municipality.
excuse me, I talked to somebody today that's a developer involved in another municipality, and he said that he couldn't, his project wouldn't go. The numbers didn't work. Without a pilot.
And this is mostly for industrial. I think one of the challenges we have here is some pilots were used for residential, which does not typically make sense.
Well, first of all, I think the SERA role, we should be focused on a business development, not a residential development. But even if you do residential, age-restricted housing would probably one of the best residential that you could propose, and we should consider and, pilot in that situation. But in a market rate apartment, I don't think we're going to be entertaining that at this stage. We got many commercial projects that we need to focus on.
Mr. Chairman, just so that everybody realizes, SERA has not gone through and recommended housing pilots, with exception to the Club Benet redevelopment project, because the intent was to go through and remove that problem because of the shootings and everything else. And that was an encouragement to have them install certain affordable units in that housing project. The only other housing project that has a pilot is the Riverton project. And that's not so much because of the housing, it's because of the $120 million for the cleanup and everything else.
And their pilot excludes the townhouse and ownership portions. Yeah.
I think that what David said is, I think there's a misconception that
There is.
We are not, residential pilot is not something we're focused on. We will not be focusing.
never
on
were,
going forward. And it doesn't pay commercial the market rate residential is something. That has a different connotation because, there's another concept that school is affected. When commercial development takes place, the school has no negative impact because there is no additional students being added to the school. So there's no cost associated to school that they need additional tax revenue. Number two, even when you do pilot, the land value that is established on this property is going to remain. And school, what they're getting currently in tax with their rate, they're going to continue to get that. So they're not completely eliminated. School still gets
There's still property tax. on the
Property
land-
tax on the land.
Portion of the.
and it's a deduction to the
assessment.
town.
And I think Mayor Kennedy O'Brien's conversations with Kennedy #2 explains a lot of that very well. So
Right.
I think that's a good foundation to point people to have a better understanding of how pilots are going to be more beneficial because there's a lot of misunderstandings about it.
Sure was, yeah.
Even Borough has a clear idea of what revenue we're going to generate over the next several years versus, having nothing. So I think
think you-
we'll
explained it
propose that
very
to,
well. Explained it very well. Because you used to hear, pilot, yes, pilots, yes, or pilot, no. And you explained it excellent. And I remember too, Glenn, you explained it to me too one time. Thank you.
Appreciate that. I could take a motion now, open to the public portion.
Second,
All in favor?
aye.
Does our public have any comments, questions?
Keep up the good work.
Thank you, Glenn. Can I take a motion to close public portion?
So moved.
Second,
All in favor?
aye.
Public, at this point, we are going to go into executive session. We have to read anything?
There's a resolution. Resolution providing for the holding of a private executive session pertaining to, in this case, we're going to eliminate A and B. We're only going to talk about items.
Thank you for coming.
The other two.
Come on, it's good to be able to do this.